Shabbat Shalom. Today we're going to talk about important things. We're talking about the year of Jubilee and this 7-year cycle. First of all, I would like to say one thing about the fact that there is a Euro Song Festival going on with countries from more than only Europe itself. It's exciting to see this happening. We have also a representative of Israel, Noah Kirel, and she is singing a song about the unicorn. And before you think, oh, what's that, a unicorn? I'd like to let you know that in the Psalms, for instance, 6 times this animal is mentioned in the Bible and in the Hebrew texts, and one of them is in Psalm 92, where in verse 10 the text is like this: my horn you will exalt like the horn of a unicorn. I shall be anointed with fresh oil. I say this because the study of today is closely related to this idea of being anointed, with the sentence, let your myrrh flush or stream. And so I mention it. I hope that she will win, but let the best one be the winner, of course. And let's start with our study. Put away this text, and there we go. We start with the text, the first of the 3 main texts in Leviticus, chapter 25, verse 10 through 13, of a larger text portion, 25 verse 1 through 27 verse 34. The larger is because there are 2 Parashat, 2 week texts connected this week in order to make the Jewish year invented by Hillel, this calendar, come to a working calendar. Let's go and read the first text. You must make the 50th year. The text starts in verse 1 of chapter 25. I'll come to that in a minute, but we start in verse 10, and it talks about the 50th year. The 7th year is in the beginning, in the first 8-9 verses. You must make the 50th year a special year and proclaim liberty in the land to all its inhabitants. It must be a great year for you. Each may then return to his property and to his family. This 50th year shall be a Yovel year for you. Jubilee, sometimes translated, but the Hebrew word is Yovel, which has more to do with the fact that this liberation and this healing and this anointing. You may not sow, what then arises by itself you may not harvest, and that is because you trust in the Lord who will provide. And you may not reap from the unpruned vine, for it must be a Yovel year, holy. You may eat from the field what it produces. In this year of Yovel, each one of you will get back his property, which is very interesting, and I'll explain why this is so interesting. This week text in the Torah is something that would be wonderful if your country, wherever you live, would apply this. Because people, if you have a system in your country where when you're poor, the government gives you money. So there are countries where this doesn't happen. But if this would take place in your country in every 50th year, with also a 7-year cycle of liberation and of I'll explain it. It's very beautiful. I'll do it very simple, but I just want to let you know, if this would take place in your country still, and it doesn't take place in our country either anymore in this way, although we have a system of money that is given to poor people, then problems like people receiving money and then being forced they are forced to give that money back. If there's any kind of a thought that this might be a person who's has wrong ideas and plans and stuff like that, that would not easily take place. Not only government, but also in city level, it would be a much nicer society. The thing is that in the time of Moses, not only were these verses there and these commandments there given by God, it was not only these verses, but also the whole culture, the whole system of living together as a people was different. In that culture, the Israeli Jewish culture, there was the basis principle of justice and of righteousness in the treatment of people with low income or no income. There was always that 7th year that I will talk about. I didn't read that text yet, we'll come to that. And the Jewish society was used to getting that 7th year again with restoration of property and stuff like that, which makes a society a very caring society. People with too little income would work for someone in order to get the money and the debts settled. Also his possessions, her possessions would be given to the other person on a not permanent basis, but a temporary basis, in order to get all the debts settled. Those people lived in such a way, and they would know that the restoration of their situation would soon arrive. Jewish society in that time was building on its, what I call the soul of the people. You have an individual soul, but there is also a soul of a people group. In that soul, there were 3 key attitudes that were very important to have still today. This text isn't only as a piece of history, but it's a hint for now as well. In that group soul, which you might have in a family or in a school situation, in a village situation, in yourself in the first place, or in the whole people group, in your tribe, or wherever you live, in that soul there were 3 key attitudes. The first one is generosity. I'll get into it a little bit later on, but first let we have these 3 listed. Generosity. The second one, a kind eye, not an evil eye, not a very bad and evil planned and judgmental eye, but a kind eye. And the third one, trust in the Lord, trust in the eternal. Generosity has to do with making sure that you give to the other person and that you want to make it possible for another person to have something that for some part depends on your attitude of making something possible for someone else, and not keeping things for yourself or for the little group that you belong to, but that you open the door for other people. You make it possible for other people to have a good life as well. Also in this whole society, the person who has been impoverished and lives as a poor person or poor family or poor city, and you make sure that the shaming situation of judgment on the basis of a false view that person is a criminal and is abusing the good things in society is prevented, because it will never come to that situation, because there's always this returning restoration. So generosity has to do not only with money, but also with the generosity of caring and of opening the door for other people, costing you something in time and perhaps in money and in times of and also in time, but also in food. A friendly eye, A kind eye is the attitude of assuming the good in the other person. The good in the other person. Until the contrary has presented itself. You assume the good. A kind eye also means that you judge someone in a positive way, that you compliment someone in a good way. Do you remember being complimented in your life by a parent, by two parents? Very important to be able to remember, but also very important to realize, no, I don't remember, I don't think I have been complimented, because then you lack, your soul has been lacking this kind eye, this generosity in giving love and attention and good judgment, which is important for the building of a good personality, and realizing that you missed it is something to work on. You cannot go back and get it, but you can make sure that what you didn't receive, you deserved. You deserved it. You didn't get it, but you deserved it. A kind eye is judge someone positively. And when you missed it yourself, you know what it means to not have it. It is perhaps a good power and a boost for yourself to give that to people around you. I remember the voice. There is a program in Holland called The Voice of Holland, and young children or adults sing a song, and the best one wins. And there are coaches who have trained these singers, and they judge these singers when they perform. The way they do that in Holland differs from the way they do it in America. I've seen a Voice of America Voice of America show, and it's fundamentally different in America, because there in America there is this kind eye, there is this complimentary and generous saying good things about the other person attitude, which in the Netherlands has been done in a different way. You see the judgment, you see the negativism, you see the laughing about something that should not be laughed about, or the cursing on television and stuff like that. There is a difference in culture, in group soul between countries. And it's interesting to just see that, and to see the differences, and to say to yourself and the people around you, we need to do this better than some other people are doing, are succeeding in this. The kind eye is knowing from your own experience in your faith, your trust in God, who saved you, who saved Israel. When you read the whole story in the Bible about the timeline of Israel, where God is asking you now to make sure that you save a person who is poor, and to bless that person with this kind eye and with this generosity. That's the second. The third one, there is this this trust. So we have three things: generosity, kind eye, and this trust in God who saved you, who saved Israel, and God is now asking you to turn in a situation where you judge someone in such a positive way that the person feels accepted and feels welcome to do things, being made known to her or him what the things are to be improved, and in such a way you get a better outcome than just the negative judgment and judging that sometimes takes place. In the text, in Leviticus, in the book of Leviticus, the third of the 5 books of Moses, it talks about the Shabbat for Adonai. And that is about giving rest to the land, the ground, in each 7th year. It's a system that still exists in Israel. And in Deuteronomy, that situation of giving rest and giving the blessing of being able to rest, and the challenge to trust in the Lord that without the land you will be able to eat because the Lord provides. It is extended to not only the ground, the land, but to people. Let me read Deuteronomy chapter 15, verse 7 through 15. You must give to him. You're not to be grudging when you give to him. If you do this, Adonai your God will bless you in all your work and everything you undertake. For there will always be poor people in the land. That is why I'm giving you this order. This order, you must open your hand to the poor and needy brother in your land. If your kinsman, a Hebrew man or woman, is sold to you, he is to serve for 6 years. Serve you for 6 years. But in the 7th year, you are to set him free. Moreover, when you set him free or her, don't let him leave empty-handed. Supply him generously from your flock, threshing floors, winepress, from what Adonai your God has blessed you with, you are to give to that person. Remember that you were a slave in the country, in the land of Egypt, and Adonai your God redeemed you. That is why I'm giving you this order today. Interesting how you have to give to other people what you received yourself. This is of course also going on with the subject of forgiveness. You receive forgiveness, you have to be forgiving to other people as well. I'll come back to that. Read in verse 15 again. You must remember that you were a slave in Egypt and that the eternal your God has redeemed you. That is why I dedicate this case to you today. Freedom in the 7th year, that's what it is. That's what it's all about. Somebody who is not able to pay his debts comes to work for the person who needs to be paid back. Possession that the poor person had comes into foreign hands, in strange hands, in the hands of the person who lent the money. In the 7th year, though, it comes all back. That is why in verse 9 it says, beware lest the pernicious thought enter in your heart that the 7th year, the year of forgiveness, is approaching. Why is this written? Because the person who would go and give a certain amount of money that the poor person is asking is tempted to think, wait a second, next year is the year, the 7th year, the year of Shemitah in Hebrew, the year of Shemitah, S-H-M-I-T-A-H. So I need to be careful because he's not able to pay me back in 1 year, and this is the 6th year. Next year he already says, thank you very much, I don't have to pay you anymore. And God says, don't think like that. Give him the money anyway, and make sure that you are prepared to say thank you in the 7th year. You can go now. You don't have to pay me back anything anymore. Is this still valid today? I'll give an answer to that in a minute. This obligation to give this money anyway is because God knows how we think, knowing that by this 7th year the obligation stops. So this makes sure and is building a society with a great, vast, extended care for the poor. They give themselves into service as a way of paying back. The rich person needs to accept that this may be 1 year, 2 years, 3, 4, 5 or 6, but there comes the year when it stops again, and there is no eternal way of eternal situation and a continuous situation of being in the service of someone else. Not only the person, but also the land. This has been very positive for the group soul of Israel. Very positive, very upbuilding, very good formation of mutual respect. But still now, yes or no, not anymore. You cannot say in a congregation nowadays, let's do this system again, because then you also need to have the obligation for the poor person who is lending, who's receiving this money temporarily that he or she needs to give back, that he comes into your service and gives all her or his possessions to you for the time of 7 years. And because that doesn't happen, you cannot do this anymore and then lend the money and say it's over in the 7th year, you don't have to give me anymore. So the person who is poor cannot claim this anymore, and there are different ways in which you can do this. If you want to do this, and everybody agrees, fine, but the commandment itself was in the time of Moses, because it was possible then, not always in our days. We need to be realistic about this. So, knowing this, the general idea behind this is to build a society which is a society of caring, of building respect to each other. There is what is still existent is the Shemitah, is the 7th year of the land. In Israel, it still exists. And the last one was in 2021, in September, Rosh Hashanah, the Jewish New Year, September 2021 till 2022, the Hebrew year 5782. The next Shemitah cycle will be in the Hebrew year 5789, 5789, which is 2028, September 2028 till 2029. What does that mean? It means that farmers don't work on their land anymore. They don't plant, they don't harvest, they don't sow, and they have signed billboards on their land saying, we are keeping Shemitah. My wife and I have been in Israel years ago at that time, and we saw those billboards where people, the farmers, let everybody, passers by, know Shemitah is there. Interesting to see this. Not everybody did it, but those who were observed did this. We're talking about the 7th year, the Shemitah year. The text in Leviticus 25 verse 1 starts with this 7th year. I'll talk about the 7 and the meaning of that a little bit in the end of this study. After that, the Torah in verse 10 talks about the commandment of the Yovel, the Jubilee year. That's what we started with the first of the 3 main texts. In the 50th year, there was liberation of possession and of person. And Torah prescribes that all the slaves needed to be let free, go free, and that all the land needed to be restored and given back to the original owners. You think, well, that's nice, that land that is given back, but there is a very interesting result of that. The demand to give land back to the original owners had a significant meaning. It meant that land could not be kept, could not be sold to other people in order to make more money, or in any other kind of way than going back temporarily in foreign hands and then go back to the original owners. The practical effect of that was that land came into the hands, that the practical effect of this system, this commandment, is that land did not come into the few hands of the rich. It served as a spiritual reminder that nothing on earth belongs to people. Everything belongs to God. But also it prevented some small few community of very rich people to own everything, and the majority owns nothing. So this is made explicit also in Leviticus later on, when God says in Leviticus 25, for instance, verse 23, the land will not be sold forever, for the land is mine. You are strangers and sojourners with me, you all. And so there should not be some people in the population who own everything. It's after all, it's mine. So the commandment of the Shemitah, the 7th year rest, and the year of Jubilee, Yovel year, are looked upon as a literal commandment with a practical agricultural meaning, but also with an economical great value, because land would never be in the hands, as I said before, of a few very rich people who up the prices very much, and is never land to all the cost, and only the rich can profit from this not honest, very dishonest system. Leaving the land alone a year, especially in the time of before the synthetic fertilizers and mechanical engineering of agriculture, was crucial to make sure that the land continued to be productive. Artificially taken care of is something else than without all these modern fertilizers and machine land and agricultural machines. And so this year of rest was a beautiful restoration, healing of the land that had produced and worked so hard. Economically, Shemitah, the 7th year Shabbat, and Yovel, the 50th year Shabbat, gave a social reset, because not only the land came to a rest and was able to restore itself, and therefore gave a greater harvest, but also the social reset of some people getting rich and richer and richer, and even if there were people very, very poor and poorer and poorer, the rich did not have any trouble even in the times of the greatest famines and stuff like that, and droughts. So the growing concentration of land owning and being rich in a few hands was prevented, by which the prices in the land could be restrained and kept under control. And the return of land to the original owners was guaranteed, which is the restoration, which is part of the total restoration of Israel, which the Bible talks about. In the 7th year, the land was liberated. Harvest had to stop, and you show that mankind finally is not depending on nature. It is, but not in the end. So you show on the 7th day of the week, the Shabbat, you also show that humankind is not depending on work and effort, its own effort, his or her own effort. It's necessary, but the final blessing is in the resting, and which we can only afford one day. And the 6 days are necessary on earth, don't take me wrong. The 6 days are very important. But the important thing is, having had those 6 days, there needs to be a 7th day. Am I right? No, I'm not. 6 days are important, and there is not to be a 7th day, but the 7th day defined by God, which is not a 7th day. The 7th day defined by God is the Shabbat, not the Sunday, not any other day than the Shabbat. So you show on the 7th day, the Shabbat, that mankind is not depending on his or her work and efforts. And it is beautiful, and it's great, and it's wonderful, and necessary, and inspiring and everything. But the Lord is under us, around us, above us, and is the one we are depending on only. Your trust in the Lord makes that you don't have to worry about life. Now that sounds very easy, and I know I'm saying something which I have to give a note by, which is that there are circumstances in which people die because there are problems. That's earth. That is our mortal life on this planet. If that happens, good luck, and be and stay in the hands of the Lord. He will be with you whether you are alive or die, and be with him in the world to come. But in normal times, if they exist, your trust in the Lord makes that you have no worries about your way of living. You save, and this year of rest is there. So now there is no harvest, and yet there needs to be vegetables and everything. So and God will help and bless. It's an exciting challenge for Israel. Even nowadays, a country with more than 9 million inhabitants. I know there are countries with many more people, and it makes it all the more difficult to do this. So this is a commandment, especially for the land, the ground of the country of Israel, and challenging in these days. It's time for the Messiah to come back, right? In the 50th year, people are liberated. On the Day of Atonement, which is close to the Israeli New Year, that year, the 50th year, starts. And it starts with a blowing the horn, the shofar. This is publicized, is made publicly known. The year has started. Sowing stops, harvesting stops. You may eat what is growing on your the flower beds and everything, but that's what it is. And people are freed from their forced labor that they had to perform because they were poor. Possessions they had to give away will be given back. People get their family back because they're restored to their families. It's a very special year, that Yovel year, which will ultimately take place later on when Messiah comes back. Is it still valid? Is it still being done? No. Already 2,000 years it has not been kept. Is that because we are disobedient? No. Read Leviticus chapter 25 verse 10 and you'll see why. You must sanctify the 50th year. So you might say, see, it's an obligation, but wait. And proclaim liberty in the land to all its inhabitants. It's an anniversary for you. Each will return to his own property and each will return to his family. Rabbis read this verse and say that this pertains to everybody. You can only do this when anybody and everybody who is meant to be in Israel is in Israel, and which is not the case yet. That means all the 12 tribes of Israel. Also the Messianic Jews who are sometimes kept out of Israel because of their faith in Yeshua. According to Maimonides, one of the famous rabbis, physicians in Judaism, this year of Jubilee was counted after the end of the Babylonian captivity and the building of the second temple, but not worked out. So this is how it goes. This is reality. Welcome to the real world. We're talking about liberation. We're talking about being let free. And the word for that in the Bible is dror. D-R-O-R. If you read it with, if you write it with those letters, Latin letters, you would say D-R-O-R. Dror means liberation. It's a rare word in the Bible. One time in Exodus, one time in Leviticus, in the text today, one time in Isaiah, 3 times in Jeremiah, 1 time in the prophet of Ezekiel. And it always means liberated, being let free, except in the book of Exodus, where the word dror is also mentioned, and it means something else. And this is the richness of the language, the Hebrew language, rich in the fact that one word can mean many things. That makes it a poor language in the sense that there are less words than in rich languages. But it makes it a rich language because one word has more meanings, and you have to have the wisdom and the shrewdness and the insight to know what it is meant in the context of how it's used. So let's read the text in Exodus about this word that means liberation, being set free. Exodus chapter 30, verse 23. Take fine, very fine spices, 500 shekel of self-flushing myrrh, and half less, 250 shekel of sweet-smelling cinnamon, and 250 shekel of sweet-smelling calamus. You need to realize that the word shekel is the name of the coins and the money in general in Israel. It's called shekel, which is the name for money and the value of the money. But as is the case in many countries, the word for the money was originally the word for the weight with which in silver or in gold payments were done. I know that in Spanish, peseta is also a word that has to do with a certain weight. So here you have this, and the text is talking about this free flushing myrrh. Shekel as a weight is about 10 grams. This self-flushing myrrh is myrrh that is flowing out of the stem of the plant without cutting the stem of the plant. It goes by itself. It is myrrh that is used to anoint, and it has to do with the word that also means to liberate and to be set free. So the spiritual meaning of this word and the spiritual meaning in the liberation of the 50th year, the spiritual meaning there, what does that have to do with this free flowing myrrh? It was interesting that some years ago we had a youth group that had a youth weekend, and they invited me and my wife to be there and to teach them in free nature and have a conversation, a group conversation, and questions and answers. And one of the questions was, how do you deal with disappointment and with loss? Free flowing myrrh has to do with that. This is how practical all this that I'm talking to you today about is. So it's that practical. If you have a disappointment, you need to open your eyes wide in order to make sure that you know if this disappointment came into existence because of someone damaging you out of nothing, out of the blue, or that this disappointment came into being because of actions by you. The text in Jeremiah, which will come up soon, talk about the heart which is not to be trusted. So it's very difficult. In other words, the Bible says, make sure that you see what the reality of your life is, because it's not easy to find that out. You don't want to see things that you cause yourself, and you live now with this disappointment that you caused yourself. Sometimes, not always, but sometimes. So if the disappointment is caused by you yourself, and then you start blaming other people, you will not be freed. You will not be liberated, and there is no free flowing myrrh at that moment. If you hang and stay and are stuck in your disappointments, and your signature is I am victim, that's my name, that's my identity, you are not to be liberated soon, and there is no myrrh that flows freely. If you force it, there will be myrrh, because myrrh can be forced out of a plant, but it doesn't anoint. It only shows what you have to do to manipulate this plant in order to get this myrrh. That's not how it goes, says God. then it doesn't work. So if you say to yourself, I'm a nitwit, I have no significance in this world, you need to be freed, you need to be comforted, you need to be told that you are worth very, very much. God works with gold and silver, that's what you are. He doesn't go with anything lower than that. In all those situations, your myrrh is not flowing yet. It is not judgment, this is saying you can change your situation. So the basis for anointing oil is this myrrh. It's the sign of the Spirit of God. In those situations, your 50th year has not been reached yet. You might have talents. Those talents are your possession, but you cannot utilize them because of your blockages. The way in which you can discover your talents, the way in which you discover them is very important. I'm not talking about the fact that you might have talents. The way in which you discover them says more about you than the talents themselves. Sometimes talents are only visible when you work on your blockages and your paralysis. There is a parable in the New Testament where Yeshua talks about talents, and one person is digging a hole and putting his talent there, and he doesn't work with it. We need to get that talent working. If it's one or more, it doesn't matter. There is a talent, and you need to discover it. You need to not throw it away or dig it in a hole in the ground. You might have more than that, and when you use them, you will bear fruit. But you cannot force the acknowledgement of your talents. You cannot say that you have these talents against the judgment of someone else that you can trust. If they say it's a little bit different, listen to them, because your heart might fool you. That when it does, your myrrh is not flowing freely and by itself. During 50 years, someone is bound. That person cannot pay his debts to another person. It might be yourself or other people. What kind of debts are we talking about, spiritually speaking? To treat someone not nice, that builds up a debt you owe. And Zacchaeus in the New Testament, look him up, found out that he was damaging people. He found that out. He acknowledged it. He says, yes, I'm this stupid person doing bad things to people. Please forgive me, God. And God says, no, make this up to the people. And he said, oh, I will pay fourfold. What does that mean? 4 times more? In terms of money, yes. In terms of life situations, it means that you not only say, I'm sorry. Okay, I said sorry. No, that means that in at least four areas of your life, you need to show that you are being sorry. You mean this being sorry, and you will not be the same nasty person, but you change your behavior so that it's believable that you are sorry. But if you don't see your guilt and you don't want to confess your own stupidity, then you're bound and your myrrh doesn't flow freely. If you are in sorrow, a sorrow that is so big that you cannot let go, then you are bound. I'm not judging you for that. I'm just saying, get well, step out of it. Don't become a victim and stay a victim and sign your identity with I'm a victim, because you're bound and you cannot be anointed. In each 7th year, there is also a possibility for a servant to come free. Being freed is not depending on the possession, the person who possesses you. That might be that you owe someone or something, or in what kind of any kind of way. The liberation is depending on you yourself. The one being bound can make the choice, I want to be free, and then you will be. And you work that out with God and then with the people that you owe. Leviticus 25:40. He will be with you. You is the owner that you owed something to. As a hired servant, that's you or me. As a sojourner, he, the person bound, will work with you until the year of Jubilee. Then he will depart from you, release what he was bound to. He with his children, so in any kind of comparable situation, to return to his family, he shall recover the property of his father's line. The blessing and the goodness of your descendants. You are restorer of holes in people's souls. Good to work at that. Let's go to the second of the three texts. Jeremiah 17 verse 7 through 10. Blessed is the person who trusts in Adonai. Adonai will be his or her security. That person will be like a tree planted near water. It spreads out its roots by the river. It does not notice when heat comes, and its foliage is luxurious. It's not anxious in a year of drought, but keeps on yielding fruit. The heart is more deceitful than anything else. The heart, I talked about that. The heart is more deceitful than anything else and mortally sick. Who can fathom it? I, Adonai, I search the heart. I test inner motivations in order to give to everyone what his actions and conduct deserve. So here is the warning. You need to realize that you cannot trust the thoughts of your heart because it makes you feel good and makes you blind to what's real. When you learn to trust God, you are increasingly being happy in spite of the circumstances sometimes. Learn to feel safe in his neighborhood, in his proximity, and you're a blessed person who trusts in him or herself, stays bound, no free-flowing myrrh. Like you drive with your car. You have a car. You might not have a car, but think of it as a situation. A car, you know what a car is. You drive with this car. Somebody drives with the car in the mountains. It's very slippery, ice, snow, or in an area where it's wet and the wheels are spinning, but you cannot drive anymore. You need to get out of there. How you cannot. You try to make the car move, but it doesn't work anymore. What do you need? You need an instrument fixed to the front of the car, and I don't know the name of this instrument in English, so I say it like this. I forgot. I'm sorry about that. And you take the hook of this instrument, which has an electric motor of itself, hook it up to something stable outside of the car, a power outside of the car. It might be a tree or something. Come back so that you can then start this instrument. And it begins to wind in the cable, and you get out of your predicament. So that is only an example to say that you need to find and seek your help outside of you, because inside there is no help. In other words, you need the help of God, who is stable, who is eternal, who doesn't change. People who trust him and who make their dependence on him are happy. What to do with people in your life who don't want to work on a solution? Let go of this problem. Let it be their problem. You tried. You need to try hard, but don't take their problem and make it your problem. And hope that their 50th year of jubilee and liberty will come soon. Let's go to the third text of today. Beriet Chadashah, the New Testament, Matthew 7, verse 15 through 23. Beware of false speakers and so-called prophets. They come to you like an innocent sheep, but in fact they are predatory wolves. You recognize them by their actions. Don't pick grapes from a thorn bush. Don't pick figs from thistles, because you don't find them there. Likewise, every good tree bears fruit, while a bad tree bears bad fruit. A good tree cannot bear bad fruit, and a bad tree cannot bear good fruit. Every tree that does not bear good fruit is cut down and thrown into the fire. So you will recognize the deceivers by their deeds. Not everyone who says to me, Lord, Master, I will enter the kingdom of heaven. Not everyone who says Lord and Master to Yeshua, because he's the one who's saying it, will enter the kingdom of heaven. Only those who do the will of my Father. And where do you find that will? in the Torah. And Yeshua himself says in John chapter 14, verse 21, 23, 24, that when you do this Torah in the best way possible, the best way you can, when you do it, you show your love to Yeshua. He didn't do away with the law. He did not perform it and end it because he did it so you don't have to do it anymore. That is some kind of strange way of explaining the Bible. On the contrary, let Yeshua talk. Let him say what he wants to say. He says, please do it. He says in Matthew 5, verse 19, he says, please do this. It's very important. John chapter 14, verse 21, 22, 23, and 24, Yeshua says, please do that, because then you show your love to me. Verse 22, in that day many people will say to me, Lord, Master, have we not preached and prophesied in your name and cast out demons in your name and done many wonders in your name? And Yeshua says, I never knew you. First start in the position that I know you. You know me, but I need to know you as well. Go away, you who live without Torah. So in the 7th year and in the 50th year, we're talking about the literal meaning. We're talking about a restoration of value of each person, of each individual. Torah makes known to you by giving these commandments, the 7th year and the 50th year, that liberation and healing is important for Torah and the giver of the Torah. That means that who wants to live according to Torah will find healing, find relationship, will find this anointing oil. Not only by Torah itself, but also of the culture around you. For instance, in a congregation. I hope that you have a congregation that will assist you and that will will make it a goal to reach these points that I'm talking about, because then there will be a community of respect and of owing love and respect to the other person, and of allowing the other person to have a good life like you. It might be in a city, it might be in a village, it might be in a friendship, in a family. There is a culture like the Jewish group soul in the time of Moses, with those 3 key attitudes: generosity, kind eye, and trusting God. If you are aiming for liberation and healing, it's good to know what you need to be freed from, and you need to heal. There's nothing to be ashamed of to find that out. Realize that your heart is not to be trusted. Realize that you and I are bound, and we are blocking and paralyzing ourselves and sometimes other people. We need healing. That is better than assuming that everything is okay and that you are fooling yourself and other people. Work on your shortcomings. The words of Yeshua, they say that a relationship with God on earth and God in heaven, it's the same God, God is one, is deeply necessary. You need to make sure that you learn to know God in all his appearances. You need to make sure that Yeshua knows you. He sends workers who do not acknowledge Torah. He sends them away. Those are the people who don't have anything with the invisible, quiet side of Torah observance. Those are the people who like the loud, visible way of interaction with other people. I cast out demons, I do this, and I prophesy that, and have your relationship with God in order. It's life's work. Yeshua acknowledges not people who don't acknowledge the work of the Torah, the content of the Torah. He does not acknowledge people who have a life without Torah. They know it, but they don't practice it. They know about it, but they're not part of it. He doesn't acknowledge them who don't acknowledge Torah, because Torah is Yeshua. He's the living Torah. You cannot do without it. Perhaps it's good to, in 177th year, to check how your relationship with God is. What does that mean for you to feel safe with God? To let him know that you're bound and to ask him for help, even if you don't even know exactly what the problem is. And then asking for liberation and healing. He'll do it. He'll help you. Who needs to reach her or his 50th year? Finally, I'd like to say something about the number 7. There is something with that number 7. There are 6 years of work, and then that 7th year of rest. And it has to do with the fact that you trust God and you show it in this year. The same thing with the 7 days of the week, 6 days of work, and the 7th day is the rest. And don't say, oh, if you have a day of rest, doesn't matter what day it is. Let God speak, please. He says, no. It's not a day of rest, it's my day of rest, which is the Shabbat. Not the Sunday, the Shabbat. Then we're speaking, then we're talking. And the 6 is important, the 6 days of work, because this is your way of living and making sure that you have income and security and stuff like that. So the 6 are important, but not without the 7th. If you do only the 6 and you don't acknowledge the 7, the day of the Shabbat, you're only a 6 person. 6. So the 7th is very important in combination with the 6, whether it's the week or the years. And so this has to do with learning to trust God and to lean on God and to be faithful to God. Is there a commandment of one of the 10 that reminds us of relationships on earth? Yes, the 7th. The 7th commandment. Not to divorce and be faithful to each other. So it's interesting to see this number 7 as an important number. There's more. The 7 weeks between the Jewish Passover, Pesach, and Shavuot, the Feast of Weeks. There are 7 weeks plus 1 day. 7 weeks of what? To get loose, to cut ourselves loose of our earthly nature. Counting the Omer, which is prescribed in Leviticus 23, reminds us that the slavery of Egypt was only over with when we received the Torah from God in the desert around Mount Sinai. 7 weeks of cutting the grain is the 7 weeks of cutting ourselves loose. Therefore, the 7th day of the week is the day that God is blessing in a special way, and on which we will become aware that we need to cut ourselves loose of our earthly situations. Although they are important, while we're on earth, they are important, and yet we should not be attached to it too much. How many times we have to forgive someone? 70 times 7. Because that helps you to cut loose from your holding on to situations that are damaging you. Forgive someone on the basis of the biblical model of forgiveness, which is the person who needs to be forgiven needs to ask for this forgiveness, and therefore needs to admit the wrong that he or she did. If you are in such a situation and you hope for forgiveness, admit your fault. Overcome your heart which is fooling you, and stuff like that. 7 days. In the week of Pesach, 7 days of unleavened bread to grow out of arrogance. Think of the 7 fruits that are given to, I give you a lot of information, I'm sorry. 7 fruits that are promised to Israel that is on their way to the promised land. And those 7 fruits are also the promise of goodness. This number 7 is very interesting. The bride in a wedding, the bride who makes a circle 7 times around her bridegroom in wedding ceremonies, and shows by this 7 times circling her future husband, I cut you loose from any connection you might have with any other girl. It's a nice tradition. So the 7th year and the 50th year is rest. Are dealing with yourself and with other people in a kingly way. By way of ending this study, Yeshua is, you read this in the Gospel of Luke, is one Shabbat he is in a synagogue in the city of Nazareth. and he's called forward to read from the scroll of Isaiah, and he says in Luke chapter 4 verse 19, it's on the screen, that the Messiah will come to proclaim release to the captives, sight to the blind, to send the brokenhearted at liberty, to declare the acceptable year of Adonai. You might think that it's just a messianic nice action, but this is prescribing the year of Yovel, the Yovel year of liberation that Messiah is to bring in Isaiah 61. And what does it say in Isaiah 61? We looked it up in the screen. It's one of our last texts. It's the last text of today. Isaiah 61 verse 4, where it says, and this is what Yeshua was reading from, they will rebuild. Let this be you, the people who are set free, and may you be set free in your life, not waiting for the 60th or 50th year or the 7th. You maybe start today. They, those people set free, those people who receive this free flowing myrrh, will rebuild the ruins of old. They will raise up the ruins of old, and they will renew the cities that lie in ruins, that have lain desolate from generation to generation. Read this text in a spiritual way. Dream away and imagine that you are in a timeline and that your family line is filled with ruins, filled with not only nice things, but with problems and with blockages, with people who hate each other and don't speak to each other anymore, stuff like that. And you are the person who come out of this family line. And there are two ways of living. You might just continue, which is not the way to do it, or be liberated, and then you are the pioneer who starts a new, fresh line. I wish that for you. Think of those three key attitudes. We will occupy ourselves with this. We will be healed of pain, damage in family lines. That is a beautiful way of spending your life with. And remember those three key attitudes: generosity, a kind eye, and trust in the eternal. Let your myrrh flush and flow freely. Shabbat Shalom.